between Hirschman and Reggie Ruggiero. McLaughlin drives like a maniac at Beech Ridge. The Parks dynamic duo, Stafford and Ruggiero. And finally, the Super Dirt Series stops at Can-Am, where Brett Hearn is a major factor. This is Maine's premier showcase when it comes to modified racing. And on this edition of Race Week, it's going to be the setting from Beech Ridge Motor Speedway as we bring you the excitement of open-wheel modified racing for a special midweek event. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Race Week. Well, it's time to go racing, and the Beech Ridge Motor Speedway is going to run the excitement of the modifieds. All the local talent is ready in the pit area, and they're going to be combined with some of the superstars of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. But that's not going to be the only story on this edition of Race Week. We'll also be taking a look at great racing action back in New England, as we'll be taking a look at Riverside Park for another Saturday night event. We'll also be taking a look at great racing action on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour at the Stafford Motor Speedway. We'll take a look at two of your favorite stops in dirt track racing, too. But right now, the racing action begins for a special midweek event for the excitement of open-wheel modified racing right here from Beech Ridge Motor Speedway.
With the cancellation of the modified portion of the Twin 100s at Oxford, tonight's Coca-Cola 100 here at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway in Scarborough is the only opportunity for Maine race fans to see the NASCAR modified drivers in action.
In the qualifying events, in heat number 1, Mike Mayetta narrowly escaped a first-lap incident with car number 2. On the restart, Paul Richardson moved the Steve DeFelice modified number 66 into the lead. At the finish, it was Richardson, followed by Beech Ridge regulars Gary Drew, Richard Pinkham, David Pinkham, and Willie Elliott. Victory earned Richardson the pole position in the Coca-Cola 100. In heat number 2, current NASCAR modified point leader Mike McLaughlin drew the outside pole starting position and quickly took control of the race. As McLaughlin and Jeff Fuller set the quick pace out front, Tom Bowles and Ridge regulars Dave Lamprin and Pete Rondo raced wheel-to-wheel for third. Tom Bowles and Dave Lamprin came together in the one turn on the white flag lap. That ended the race with the yellow and checkered flags waving for winner Mike McLaughlin, followed by Jeff Fuller in second, and quickest Beech Ridge finisher, rookie Pete Rondo, in third. In the consolation event, Reggie Ruggiero, who had problems in his qualifying heat, blistered the third-mile oval, leading from green to checkered. In the Coca-Cola 100, Paul Richardson of Georgetown, Massachusetts, took the early lead until lap 9, when local driver Gary Drew used a daring move in lap traffic to take over at the front of the pack. First yellow on lap 17 when Dave Lamprin buried his car in the one-turn sandbank. Caution on lap number 39 for Lou Weatherby, and that caution saw Mike McLaughlin on pit road for 4 fresh tires. Caution on lap 40 with leader Gary Drew smoking and Reggie Ruggiero in for rubber. At the halfway point, it was Gary Drew the leader, and Jeff Fuller was second. Tom Bowles, Willie Elliott, and Bobby Gahan rounded out the top 5. Trouble on lap 63 as Reggie Ruggiero and Tom Bowles come together in turn 4. Bowles pitted. He continued in the race, and caution out again on lap 64 as Ruggiero loses a tire. By lap 70, Gary Drew continued as the leader with Willie Elliott second, Bobby Gahan third, and Mike McLaughlin moving up into 4th position. On lap 72, McLaughlin moved to the outside and started his march to the front. On lap 76, Mike McLaughlin went around Gary Drew and into the lead. At the finish, it was Mike McLaughlin, followed by Bobby Gahan. Highest finishing Beech Ridge regular Willie Elliott was 3rd, Richard Pinkham was 4th, and brother David Pinkham was 5th. Reggie Ruggiero, Scott Watts, Spike Mattatall, Paul Richardson, and Jeff Fuller rounded out the top 10.
Mike, you said before the race it could be anybody's race, and it ended up being yours.
Well, yeah, things went our way. A couple points in the race, I figured we were in trouble. But at the end, the car just, I don't know whether the stagger closed up, but the car was loose, and then I moved out a little bit further and further in the groove, and it went better and better, so I put her out there and went for it, and went to the front. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
The Beech Ridge Late Model Sportsman Division, with almost two-thirds of the 1989 season completed, only 40 points separate the top 10 runners. At the green flag, Barry Babb of Windham, Maine, moved into the lead from the outside pole, followed by George Libby, Rick Zemla, and Sonny DiRenzo. Babb set a quick pace in the caution-free 35-lap event, and at the finish, it was Barry Babb, followed by George Libby, Glenn Cusack, Rick Harrison, and Bob Randall.
On Victory Lane at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway for Race Week, I'm Dan Wolf reporting.
Thanks, Dan. Next, the action shifts to Friday night at the Stafford Motor Speedway for the running of a NASCAR Modified Tour Special called the CarQuest 125. All the stars came out, and so did the people to witness the excitement of this, a special NASCAR Modified Tour event. Steve Park, by luck of the draw, would be starting right up front with defending Tour champion and point leader Mike McLaughlin to the outside. Second row on the inside would get jammed up just a bit as Wayne Anderson would back out of it. But at the front of the field, the action was on for position number 1. Steve Park would suddenly give way to Mike McLaughlin, and he would take over the number 1 spot. And former track champion Brian Ross would look strong to the outside for a while. Then Mike Stefanik would tuck it down low. Ross would dive to the bottom, looking for some racing room at the lower edge of the racetrack and pick up position number 2. Off the second turn like a rocket, Stefanik would make the same type of move and suddenly move in. Middle of the pack, Reggie Ruggiero and Tony Hirschman were battling. Off turn number 4, Hirschman would tag Ruggiero. Wayne Anderson would spin, and Reggie Ruggiero would slam the wall hard in turn number 1. Doug Heveron would also be involved in the mix-up with car number 3. Wayne Anderson would try to get back to the pit area, flat tire and suspension damage, as Ruggiero would make Hirschman aware of the fact that he was not pleased. The crew and the team were feverishly working in the pit area to get the 44 back in the competition. It was Mike McLaughlin still setting the pace. Mike Stefanik was now up to second, and Brian Ross was forced to settle for third. Tommy Bowles was a factor in position number 4 with car number 76. Then suddenly Jeff Fuller would develop a right front flat with car number 21. Mike Stefanik, while contending for the lead, would develop a right front flat also with car number 16. A caution would come out, and this would send a parade of cars into the pits, including George Kemp with car number 26. Mike Stefanik, the 16, Doug Heveron, and Tom Baldwin all on pit road. A quick change of tires, and it was back to racing action as usual on the racetrack. Brian Ross and Mike Stefanik were threading the needle through traffic as Jamie Nomena would tag Stefanik, but Stefanik would be able to get away with car number 16. Another mix-up in turn number 1. Paul Richardson was involved, so wasn't Jeff Fuller, George Kent, and the 81 of Stephen Park. Back to green, it was Mike McLaughlin, now hunted down by Tommy Bowles. Bowles would reel him in. These two cars running on the same tires as they started the event. Now Reggie Ruggiero would come back out of the pits. A credit to his crew, some 70 laps down. But back at the front of the field, Mike Stefanik had come from the back of this pack. He was the fastest car on the racetrack and would move right on by the 76 of Tommy Bowles. It was Stefanik who was literally all over the back bumper of Mike McLaughlin, who had led the majority of this event. McLaughlin was still setting the pace, but Stefanik was right there. Then suddenly, in turn number 4, Stefanik was out in front with car number 16. McLaughlin would try to fight back, but couldn't maintain his quest for position number 1. Closing laps of the event, Reggie Ruggiero would back off the pace just a bit. Hirschman would try to get by, then Ruggiero would do a little blocking. The two would almost make contact. Hirschman would get away, but Ruggiero would pay some back and slide to the infield. But on turn number 4, Mike Stefanik would dazzle him to the finish with car number 16. Mike McLaughlin would finish in second, Tommy Bowles was third, Brian Ross was fourth, and Tony Hirschman would finish in the 5th spot.
The kid's good, you know, he can't take nothing away from him. He run me right down to the bottom of the track and said, here, you can run in the dirt and what little track I left you, and I said, I'll take it. So he run me hard. He stayed on the outside. We had a good, clean, hard race. Hey, what can I say? We just had the fresher tires, and here we are.
What did you think when you see Mike Stefanik pitted? Did you think you had things pretty well wrapped up at that point?
No, I knew it would be close at the end. It wasn't so bad when he pitted for 2, but when he come in 5 laps later and put on the left side, then I knew I was in trouble. But, you know, what are you going to do? That was our strategy. We went for it, and we come up a little short.
Yeah, the car felt real good tonight, the Bolt Jeep Eagle car. It felt real strong, and we started losing tires towards the later stages of the race, but I figured we could hang on and have a good finish. But a couple times I got right along. I almost had him right alongside him, but he's a tough guy to get by, and had to fall back in a second. Then we had the caution later in stages, and the tires cooled, and it was tough to get him hooked up for 10, 12 laps, and Stefanik had fresh rubber, and he just drove on by.
Late model feature event was up next, and Tony Sylvester was the man that dominated the racing action up front when Chuck Zantarski would move in and try to contend with car number 8. John G. Fuller would also run strong when the backup Sylvester car of Kenny Johnson would get crossed up and go around. Involved with car number 98 of Canapia. Off turn number 4, John G. Foulin would tangle with Zantarski. The two would come together and tag the wall hard, with Zantarski taking the worst of the wear. Cliff Stakey would drop off the pace. Tommy Fern would make it 3 wide in the middle as Rondo would run the outside, with Wade Gagner patiently waiting in the wing. Art Caruso, last week's feature event winner, would run strong with car number 12. Then Herb Bennett and Mad Dog George Bissett would get locked together, slide down through the center of the infield, but all would be okay. It was Sylvester who was the driving force at the front of this field, and he would hold on and take down the victory. Tom Fern in for second, Wade Gagner was third, Norm Plantier was fourth, and Phil Rondo would finish in the 5th spot. To take down the win. Bruce D'Alessandro in for second over Dwight Jarvis, Dan Avery, and Ted Brown. This Friday, it's the Winston 100 for the NASCAR Modified. Jerry Marquis would win in the Pro Stock division over Punky Karen, Keith Biondaka in third, Roger Raymond, and Eddie Brio Jr. In the streets, it was Eddie Zutella, Charlie Locke, Lenny Silver, Ed Stone, and Tom Carey. Welcome back to Race Week. Well, it's time to take a look at more great racing action here in the Northeast. As next, we'll be back at Riverside Park Speedway for another Saturday event before the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour moves into Riverside. Saturday night at Riverside Park Speedway, it was John Cody to the inside of George Rudinas in row number 1. Second row, Ed Kennedy and Brian Schofield, as Wade Cole would have a problem with car number 33 initially on the start. But at the front of the field, John Cody would be the first car to get in trouble with car number 21. The Super 4 machine would spin, and now Rick Fuller would show some life as he put the chase number 77 to the inside of Ricky Summers. But Summers would manage to hold on to his spot. Dan Avery would put some pressure on, and so would John Zavisa, as Mike Stefanik was coming from the back of the pack to work with 4-time champion Bob Pulvereri with car number 711. Then suddenly, Rick Fuller would get up on top of the number 33 of Wade Cole. In that scramble here, John Zavisa would be involved, so wouldn't Dan Avery. Bruce D'Alessandro would go to the inside and still manage to get away. But the Coles car would suffer the most of sheet metal damage, as car number 33 would still be in the hunt when the field would go back to green. Ed Kennedy was a new contender for position 1, as Rudinas would get a little crossed up initially on the start. Ricky Summers would show some life as he moved to the inside and to try to pick up the spot. But Rudinas would fight back. Front pack of cars, now Mike Stefanik and Reggie Ruggiero were threading the needle through the front of this field when suddenly Rudinas would get stopped once again. It was car number 711, Bob Pulvereri, to spin, as yet another caution would come out. Back to green flag racing, Mike Stefanik was to the inside of Ed Kennedy. It was Stefanik now at the front of the field. Kennedy would try to hold on for second, and third became the hot spot on the racetrack. Reggie Ruggiero moved to the inside of Ricky Summers. Rudinas would try to stay in the middle as Kennedy would try to fight to pick up position number 1. It was Ruggiero on the bottom, lap after lap, as Bruce D'Alessandro would also show some life with some damage done to the back end of his sheet metal with car number 90. But now the dynamic duo at the front of the field was Mike Stefanik, hunted down by Reggie Ruggiero. The defending champion would give Stefanik a run on the inside, but not quite complete the move that would give him position number 1. But the story was soon to be told, as Stefanik would still hold on for the number 1 spot. Ruggiero would literally work him over. But rewind the story in turn 1 when Ricky Summers would cut a tire to the left side of the car and go around with car number 9. When the caution came out, the field would then regroup, and it was Ruggiero to see the inside lane suddenly open up. The two would still battle consistently lap after lap, but once given the opportunity, Ruggiero would try to complete the move that would give him position number 1. Evenly matched, they would battle once again until Ruggiero would find his way to the front of the field. Mike Stefanik was still right there on his back bumper and wouldn't let Ruggiero get out of his sight. Right through the closing stages of the event, it was Reggie Ruggiero to take down the win. Mike Stefanik in for second, George Rodinez was third, Bruce Alessandro was fourth, and Jerry Marquis would finish in the fifth spot.
We got up probably a lap 20, and then I was able to race with the guys up front, top 4 or 5, and me and Mike had a heck of a race going for the last 20 laps, and that last restart proved to be this disadvantage because I think we had a little bit softer tires, and we were able to stick on the bottom on a restart because his must have cooled off, and he was a gentleman. We banged a little bit, but that's Riverside Park.
I was talking to Mike Stefanik before the race, and Mike said, boy, I'll tell you, I'd love to come back here and race with Reggie again. We have nothing but the cleanest racing. He says he feels real safe next to you, and you guys definitely proved it tonight at Riverside.
Yeah, you know, Mike and me are good competitors. We run on a tour, and we run side by side all over the place. You can trust a few people, some you can't. Mike is one of them you can trust, and as people know, last year we put on a bunch of good shows, and this year Mike came back for one race and put a good show on for everybody.
30 Circuits was the story for the Pro Stock feature event, and Scott Booley and Rick Turcotte would make up the front row. Eddie Kozel and Dave Prowse making up row number 2. As the field went to green, it was Booley who'd start to pull away up front. Just into the top 5, Bob Sokolowski and Eddie Carroll would come together. Mark Farino, Tom Rosati, and the rest of the field would try to scramble to squeak by as Dave Prowse sat stranded on the racetrack with car number 52. On the restart, it was again Scott Booley in command. Rick Turcotte trying to hold on for second, but look out, here comes John Lobo Jr. Ed Carroll also in the hunt, and so wasn't Tom Rosati, the defending track champion with car number 07. Meanwhile, 3 wide off turn number 4. Carroll stuck to the outside, Lobo in the middle, and Tom Rosati working the inside groove. Jerry Marquis and Dave Caruso also in contention here. As Caruso would take the high road, Marquis would take the low. Tom Rosati would pick up the spot easily on the inside of Turcotte, as John Lobo would send some sparks flying, as Dave Caruso and Brian Prunta would also be in the thick of things. It was then Tom Rosati to take over the lead. A little further back in contention, Mark Farino and Dave Prowse would come together as the two 52s would parallel spin in turns 1. It was Tom Rosati to take down the victory. Scott Booley in for second, Jerry Marquis was third, Ed Carroll was fourth, and John Rosati would finish in fifth. Late model feature event was next, and John Meany would set the pace with car number 15. Battle was already on for second. Kenny Lavoie running the bottom as he would put some pressure on Vasseur to the outside as Vasseur would go spinning with car number 10. Then Chris Wood would go around with the 2X, tagging Roger Charette. Danny Lavoie, Gary Fermani, and Ted Chalmers would also be involved, and so would Fred LaForge with car number 4. Back up front, Tom Carey and Robbie Bouchard get hitched together, and Tom Carey would have a right flat front tire. Back to the front of the field, it was Gary Pelletier on the inside of Frank Luttrell. Luttrell was coming on strong, and so wasn't Jim Rule with car 55, as G. Perry would work the inside lane. Dan Tolina, former track champion, also thread the needle to try to get to the front of the field, as Bob Skinger was also running strong. It was still Meany to dominate the racing action to the front. He would hold on and take down the win. Rob Bouchard in for second. Kevin Zarnecki was third. G. Perry was fourth, and Dan Tolina was fifth. Well, now it's time to take our second commercial break. And when we come back, we'll be back at the Thompson International Speedway. We'll also be taking a look at the excitement for 2 major stops on the Skoal Dirt Circuit. All of that and more right after this. We're back, so are you ready for more great racing action? Of course you are, because next we're going to be heading to the Thompson International Speedway. Now, the setting is a Sunday event at the Big T. It's loaded with great racing excitement. Then after that, we're going to be taking a look at dirt track competition for 2 major midweek events. But right now, it's off to the Thompson International Speedway. Winston Racing Series Modifieds at Thompson. Buck Ackley to the inside of Jerry Savage. Al Smith and Steve Lombardo would be on the outside with car number 73. In a turn number 1, mad scramble, but at the front of the field, it was Buck Ackley to set the pace. Jerry Savage would back up just a bit, and Jeff Berry would come to life with Chuck Doherty looking strong when Bob Potter would change lanes to make a bid underneath Fletcher coming off turn number 4. Ted Christopher and Mike Christopher just out of the top 10, but were starting to show some life and coming to the front of the field. Then suddenly, Steve Lombardo would spin. Eddie Spires would fly through the air with sparks with car number 3X. Bob Potter would also be involved. Mike Paquette would be involved in this mix-up. And Reggie Ruggiero would go for the big bath in turn number 2. But Jerry would be able to rejoin in the competition here. But with the field under caution, Bob Potter's number 51 would be one of the victims of the casualty. Off turn number 4, Willie Hardy was coming on strong. So wasn't Mike Christopher. As Jeff Berry would go to the outside, Glenn Sullivan would apparently have a problem with car number 34. Sullivan would drop off the pace. Savage would pick up a spot. Buck Ackley would be pressured for the lead as Jeff Berry was now in command and would take over position number 1. Willie Hardy had found the number 3 spot and was looking for 2. When Reggie Ruggiero was battling with Moose Hewitt, contending now among the top 5 cars. Ruggiero would dive to the inside, but Savage would shut the door. As Hewitt would run the outside lane, it would be Jeff Berry to take down the win. Buck Ackley in for 2nd, Willie Hardy was 3rd, Reggie Ruggiero was 4th, and Moose Hewitt would finish in the 5th spot. Pro stock feature of that initially in the start, Rich Wood would start to pull away. Wayne Savlik would battle for position number 2 as Jim Rosenfield would run the inside with car number 44. Houlihan on the outside. Then heavy hitters like Jimmy McCallum would start to thread the needle. Down underneath Jim Rosenfield with Dave Caruso, who lost the motor early in the day, running strong with the backup engine with car number 1X. Caruso would run the bottom and pick up the spot. Then it was McCallum who'd slingshot alongside of car number 6 to take over the lead. Joe Rosenfield would spin to the center of the infield with car 29, then regroup and contend back among the top 10 cars. While the field was under caution, back up to green, it was Houlihan who would run strong for a while. Then Jay Copano would make contact with the wall hard with car number 17. Tony Papali would look good initially on the restart, but McCallum would be literally hunted down by Wood as Houlihan would try to work the inside groove with car number 1. 5 cars under the old proverbial blanket as McCallum would lead the charge and hold on and dominate the racing action. Finishing in 2nd was Rich Wood. Dick Houlihan was 3rd. Dave Caruso was 4th, and Tony Papali would finish in the 5th spot. Late model feature of that, mad scramble to get to the front of this field when suddenly car 34 would get crossed up. Sylvester would dive to the inside. Gary Fermani would go to the outside. Lockwood would squeak on by. But back at the front of the field, John Ledger, who had a commanding lead, suddenly found it vanishing as car number 28, Mike LeVetri, would take over position number 1. Norm Plantier, the crafty veteran, would try to run low, and right behind him was Phil Rondo. But it was Mike LeVetri to secure the victory with car number 28. John Ledger in for 2nd. Plantier would hold on for 3rd. Chuck Zantarski was 4th. And Tony Sylvester would finish in the 5th spot. Well, the racing action at the Thompson International Speedway was definitely impressive. But now it's time to again move on to 2 major events in the Skoal Super Dirt Series. As next we'll be taking a look at Can-Am, then it's on to Canandaigua as Brian Spade will file this report.
We're on the 6th race of this year's Skoal Racing Super Dirt Series at the Can-Am International Speedway. It's the 18th of July, and already in the past 18 days, these drivers have run 14 times. Doug Hoffman, the defending champion of this race here at the track, has already had problems with his car tonight, already having to fix the rear end. Doug, what was the problem earlier?
Well, we ran Fonda last night, and the track was pretty rough, and we had to change motors after the Fonda show, and we spent all day hooking the new engine up, and when we got here, we wanted to check some of the other parts in the car, and we found out we had a bent axle tube in the rear end, so the quickest thing for us to do was to just change the whole rear end. So.
Is it all fixed now? Do you think you can defend tonight's title?
I think we have a good shot at it. We'll see how it goes in the heat race. I think I start pretty far in the back, but the car felt pretty strong out there. As soon as the track comes around, we'll be in good shape.
With a jam-packed crowd on hand, here's a different seat in the house. Over 50 dirt modifieds and small block modifieds were on hand last Tuesday. Among them, such notables as New Jersey's Billy Pouch, who had just broken the Al Tasnady record at Flemington the Saturday beforehand. Along with Pouch were such family operations as Billy Decker, whose father and brother work on his crew, and Kenny Tremont Jr., whose father, Kenny Sr., owns his car. The question would be full mood madness or not, and as the green flag dropped, the answers would come very quickly soon after. Brad Hearn was trying to run through the pack with the Freightliner trucking number 6, getting involved in this little tangle here with Richard Salva in turn number 4. Brad Hearn quickly moved up into the top 5. Other drivers suffering some bad luck during the night included Bobby Payne, who broke his front end and hit the front stretch wall driving the ultra-fab Ewing Hawkins 34. Kenny Tremont, who gave our cameraman quite a scare with some mechanical problems in the 115. And Danny Johnson, who spun out and dropped out of the event by lap number 15. This left Danny's brother Alan in the lead with Pat Ward second and Brett Hearn in third. But soon, full moon fever would strike Alan Johnson. This has been a similar situation all season long, leading and dropping out. Brett Hearn inherited the lead, and Doug Hoffman managed to muscle his way up to the second spot after all those rear-end troubles. The show of the night ended up being between Hoffman and Billy Pouch for the number 2 spot, as they diced inside and outside on Can-Am's wide turns. Pouch managed to shoot by Hoffman for second and soon set his sights on Brett Hearn's lead.
These guys were tossing these little pebbles up on the track in my groove on the bottom, and they just messed me up getting off. I couldn't get any bite to get under them. But lap traffic, I was really on top of them. I think I would have had him in lap traffic.
I saw his nose one time, and they were yelling at me on the radio, Pouch is there. So, you know, I knew he was close. And I just had to get out of that lap traffic, get through that, and try to string a couple good laps together, and we were able to do that.
The drive of the night had to have been Barefoot Bob McCready, who came all the way from the last spot to take the third spot at the end. Brett Hearn, he just kind of waved goodbye to the competition on this night, taking home his third school win of the year and over $6,000. Reporting for Raceweek, I'm Brian Spade.
Well, thanks, Brian. Well, that's going to kind of wrap things up for another edition of Raceweek. We want to remind you that coming up next week on Raceweek, it's more great racing action here in the Northeast. We'll be at Riverside Park Speedway for that very talked-about midweek event for the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour, where $50,000 has become the main attraction for some 51 cars already.